Is there any other comment on what Chris said, by the way? Yeah. This is Alan Rice, I believe.
Hello there. I was just interested in your talking about South African musicians and then going on to talk about white jazz musicians in Britain. And I was interested in the figure Joe Harriott and what his biography, you know, born in Jamaica, came to Britain in the late 50s, early 60s, and the way in which he ended his life in the early 70s in penury, despite being probably one of the greatest jazz musicians, well, I'd say probably one of the top 3 or 4 jazz musicians in Britain in the whole of the 1960s. And I was just wondering, and it seemed to me that there is a story about race there, in terms of the fact that he wasn't able to make his living whilst there were quite a lot of white guys around who were inferior musicians playing the same kind of music who were making their living. So I was just wondering if you had any ideas about what the reasons were for that, and whether that shows a kind of latent racism in the British jazz scene, or in British society, which then affects the British jazz scene.
Yeah, I agree absolutely about Joe Harriott. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Right. Joe Harriott was an outsider, and I think if you examine some of the great jazz revolutionaries and innovators, they have been outsiders, and very often, because they've been outsiders and they haven't fitted in with the more conservative musical elements around them, they've suffered financially. And of course, Joe Harriott didn't just suffer financially. I mean, he was ignored even by the NHS, which we're all fighting for now, and of course, died of cancer in a very miserable way. I think being an outsider and being a great jazz musician are very often synonymous. And I think Joe Harriott, when I say suffered from that, it's a form of sufferance which is closer to genius than anything else.
You started this thing talking about history, and right now we're in a global thing where improvisational learning and coaching is coming to the world, not only in context to music, but in the workplace, in education. It's a very big thing. So in relation to what you're saying, is something at the heart of what I feel as a dancer and a musician. And if I can put it to the panel, I just wrote a question to talk about the history of improvisation and the barriers to no limits, because of the history. And I feel people need to know the history, because there's been a history to why people didn't take on improvisation within the colleges. I said as a dancer now who's not only a dancer, who's the UK Club Jazz dancer, who's a professional contemporary dancer, who now, at the moment, what's happening in the context to the whole world in the sense of dance, improvisation has become a big thing. But what happened, the problem what you spoke about, there was a history to people adopting an improvisational process with no limits and no boundaries. So the question is to the panel, can they comment on the barriers to improvisation with no limits, no barriers in a historical context? I feel that's important to speak about.
Can we take that at the end?
Yes, okay, it's no problem.
I've got 2 more speakers.
Yes.
There. Yeah, I've got a note of it though. I just wonder whether anybody on the panel would like to respond to the question earlier on about the barriers to improvisation worldwide. Now, I wouldn't mind cutting to the chase a little bit with that, and that I think that resonates a little bit with some of what Serge was saying about the kind of the fight between very technical approaches and more kind of passionate approaches and cultural approaches to understanding what jazz is as well, you know, and obviously there's other things that impact on improvisation, the mechanisation of reproduction of music, a number of things are going on at the moment. But in terms of that kind of different values put on different kinds of jazz, would anybody like to kind of comment on that? Kevin, you're picking your mic up. Is that because you'd like to comment on that? Chris, perhaps?
Well, then let the musicians talk.
I mean, there's various arguments about the differences of jazz. I mean, there's so many styles. I call it styles. I spoke to the late Harry Beckett. It's about styles, you know. There's swing style, there's bebop, hard bop, there's free jazz, there's avant-garde jazz, there's improv, there's bossa nova, there's Latino. There's so many different styles, and it's hard to cover all that ground. You know, you can be a spot-on sight reader, be the top lead trumpet player, and that is so specialist that it might mean that you can't improvise as well as second chair. It's such a wide arena. To call it all jazz is difficult, you know. These things are high and low value. Well, we know the stories of the various arguments that are going on.
Okay, Adam, you're holding a mic up.
Well, yeah, I agree with that. I think, but I don't know if it's as much a problem with the colleges as the people that are going to the colleges. I mean, way too many music college students. You know, they have too much of a fondness for Keith Jarrett. But you know, and some people would say that bop is easier to teach in the college because it's easier to formalise and codify it. But I don't even know if that's true. I think ultimately you have to do it yourself. And the path that you were talking about, Kevin, I mean, you know, transcribing, studying, listening, and practicing like mad, I think that's the only way.
Okay, can we have Washington, I think.
Anyone can answer my question. While jazz has been around for such a long time before reggae, I would argue that reggae has become a more powerful music of resistance. Why has it? Anyone want to answer?
I think the reggae music, for example, the people who started to play reggae managed to keep it as a root form, to keep the roots behind the reggae. So that's which is just expressed from inside to the outside. But the jazz is different because since the Western, jazz started to travel, like Kevin was saying, traveling to come back to Europe. And now, like I was saying before, to me, jazz, the way jazz is in Europe now, it sounds to me like classical music because too many restrictions now. So there's no longer freedom. It's supposed to be freedom in improvisation, but I don't think it is because coming from the college, having the same licks, the same cliche, not only in England, even in Europe, they all sound the same. And when you finish that college, you need to get out on the street and fight on the street, play with different musicians from different parts of the world, and then to try to find a sound. If you don't do that, you will not move on, you will not be yourself. And if you try to do that like someone like myself, you will face another people, I call them purists. They will keep saying to you, that's not jazz. Jazz is supposed to be the swing. So, I remember I played many tracks. I used to play many tracks like Nika's Dream and Tone, which at the beginning original was I think Latin stuff, but I play in reggae feeling. You know, check Alexander Monti, which he played, check Bombale tune, he played that in a jazz way. Or he take original standard, like So What or whatever, and then he play into different style. That's what I do. I take last Friday I play Footprints, but I just transform it into an African vibe. If I didn't say this is Footprints, you won't recognize it. But when I start to play the tune Footprints, you will say, oh yeah, I know that tune. That's Footprints. So that was the problem with the jazz.
Okay, we have another question. Sorry, Ken, do you want to say something? Can we have the other question first?
Touch base with the reggae there because I think this thing with reggae music is it's bringing there's a powerful vibe going on with reggae because it's the beat, you know, and it's an Ayabingi. There's an Ayabingi rhythm in there that was something to do with resistance in Jamaica. You know, I don't want us to say that there's a particular rhythm, and some of these come out of religious ceremonies. book him in his ceremonies. That, you know, we're over here, we don't know enough about that. You know, you're born in Jamaica, I can hear that. So you're a yard man, so you know more, you know. But these things, I spoke to Ernest Ranglin, and he said to me, well, reggae was only one. Reggae and blue beat and ska and all these things, there are only one or two of the rhythms that were being practiced over there. And we're still learning about more. But rhythms, Ngom's here, these rhythms, they have a spiritual significance to them, you know, and they're universal.
Okay.
Hi, sorry, I'm really speaking on behalf of the layman here. I'm not a jazz intellect at all, but maybe this is my point. So, personally, for me, jazz, and I think this is an undertone to a lot of the conversations that have been going on here, for me, jazz has been synonymous with reinvention, and has always been part of the revolutions of race, of society, and so on and so forth. Perhaps one of the biggest problems, and this is echoing through this panel and through the audience here, is that jazz, like other styles of music, such as folk and so on and so forth, has become a victim to stylization, intellectualization, and formalization, or whatever you want to call it. And as going back to my first point, for me, as a layman, lover of jazz, but always a layman in the field, it has been reinvention. It's been about improvisation. It's been about the free spirit, about liberalization, about expressing the soul, and the it's just not that. Standard jazz, where did that term come from? That seems to be a more modern phenomenon of jazz music. And this is, I think, just a comment, but I'm just trying to summarize the feeling I'm getting for you and the feeling that I've always had in these kind of panel discussions, which is just, jazz has become a thing. It's become jazz. It's become something that is divisible into subgenres. And that's not, I think, from its Creole roots and the various other birthplaces of jazz. It's not where it was really intended to be. And